Okay, so today we're talking number lines of triangle twists. This is an idea that I really developed in the past summer, thinking about like what are all the different options for triangle twists, for various different kinds of twists, and how are the ones on the front related to the ones on the back? They aren't just different ways of looking at the same thing, they can be connected into a spectrum. So today we're going to talk about, okay, what is the connection between these different sizes of triangles? Is there a limit to the number of triangle twists? And we'll be folding together a tessellation that you can plug in whatever triangle twist you want. And this is using pretty simple methods, just plugging in a different twist. So let's first start with a demonstration of what the heck is going on here. I've got my 32-fold triangle grid on a hexagon for the main folding, and then I'll use this triangle grid for the demonstration. So starting off, and I'll do this both visually and a little bit with the crease pattern. When you have a closed triangle twist, you have all of your mountain folds coming into a single point, and then I'm going to choose to rotate these right-handedly to get them all to lay down, and I can squash that. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw on two of my pleats, and these two pleats are going to stay exactly the same throughout everything that I do after. So I've got the center of my twist here for the closed case. Well, if I want to make this into an open twist, keeping my two existing drawn on pleats in place, then I will shift the free pleat over one spacing to get the open twist. And now my center is here. Well, if I can do that to get an open pleat, why not do it again? And now I'm outlining a larger triangle in the center now with two grid spacings on each edge. Zoom in a bit more so you can see that clearly. And I can squash that into a triangle twist too. This is the one that I'm going to choose to use for today's larger tessellation. Now my center is out here. And you'll notice that our first center was on a grid intersection. These last two have not been. If I extend out one further though, so now I'm outlining a triangle in the center with 3 spaces per side, I find that I do get back to a point in the center that is on a grid intersection. And this might seem like a funny thing to think about, but if you're thinking about tessellations where you need to have a position of 3-fold rotational symmetry, say in the center, then it's very convenient to have the center of your twist be a grid intersection, just for ease of gridding. And I have videos on triangle-centered triangle grids on hexagons, but it's a lot easier to just go the grid-centered route. At least a lot easier to do calculations and grid rotations, etc., etc. The other reason why this is important, though, is when we go in the opposite direction. So if we come back to our closed square here, what happens if we head in the opposite direction? Do we get to the twists on the back? And we will, eventually. It starts out looking rather improbable, but I have found a way for this structure to go flat, and check out my video on cursed twists. So this would be an example of a cursed triangle twist. And then we go back one more, and we've got that same cursed energy going on, but in another direction. Notice I'm still keeping the direction of folding. And then if I come back one more spacing, so what we just did is we passed through places where the center was here, where the center was here, and we're coming to a place where the center is at the intersection of the valley folds of the original two pleats. And if that is the center, then we're going to get a closed triangle twist on the opposite side. And so we can see there's a connection, direct connection between triangle twists on one side growing ever bigger, and then through these two intermediating, or what I sometimes call cursed twists, to those same triangles growing and growing on the back. So shifting that pleat one more space, we end up with the open triangle on the back. Shifting it again, we get that double open triangle on the back. And here I'm taking advantage of the fact that what you see outlined on the back is the same as what you've outlined on the front. So that is just a general rule of twists, and we can use it to read the twist from either side. So that's the number line of triangles, and it's a very regular spacing. We're marching along this line, moving the center of the twist relative to two pleats that are staying in place. So these two pleats that are staying in place, that is really important because that is how we fold tessellations. We have a pleat intersection or an overlap or whatever interaction between two pleats, and we need to decide how we're going to finish that with a twist. So that's what's going on under the hood, so to speak. So let's go and apply this to a bigger tessellation. So this is going to look really familiar if you watched the triangle pleat intersections video. We're going to start at a different location and then modify what we do. So instead of a hexagon of triangle intersections, we're going to have those three triangle intersections covering the closed triangle twist, and then the next intersection will be that double open triangle that I showed you in the demonstration. So, diving in, I'm going to start by folding a closed triangle twist in the center of this grid. And again, this is a 32 fold triangle grid on a hexagon. And I didn't mark where my center was in the beginning because I'm relying on my mountain folds coming to the corners of my paper. Once I've got those mountains in place, I'll lay them down, and I'm going to arbitrarily choose a right-handed direction. This is something that you'll just want to remember so that you can do the same twist direction for all of the closed twists. With that twist in place, I'll squash. And then I'll use the same technique that I taught in the triangle intersections video and come one spacing out from the corner of my closed twist. So I'm coming one spacing out, making a three-way intersection of mountains. And instead of making a closed twist here, I'm going to bring that intersection so it lays on top of my closed triangle. So pulling that out, going one spacing on the existing pleat from the corner of the closed triangle, then erasing the extension of that pleat to run mountains out in the other two grid directions, and then bringing that in and laying it down on top. Okay, then I'll rotate my paper to the next pleat from my closed triangle and do exactly the same thing. So one grid spacing out, I'll set up a three-way intersection of mountains. This will create a tube going out to the corner of the paper. And then once again, I will do exactly the same thing. One grid spacing out, create a three-way intersection of mountains, creates tubes now on both sides. And now we have our setup to begin putting in whatever size of twist we want on these 6 pleats that are present. So the structure that we're going to have here is these intersections of tubes. And I did flip over to the other side, but we're not going to be folding from this side, so it's more of a demonstration. We're going to have the structure of intersections of tubes that look like they're weaving into each other. So I'll have this exact thing repeated down below with the vertical tube coming up and in. And the variable that we have is how much space do we give to these windows between this structure. So flipping back to the other side, the one that I've seen other people also fold, it's commonly called Japanese weave, would use an open triangle twist. So it would have that open triangle, and you would end up with one spacing. So one spacing on each edge of the triangle here. But what I'm going to show you all today is that while we want to keep this tube going, so we want to keep this fold in place along that center line of the hexagon, this pleat is actually free to move as much as we want. So I can make it double open, and I happen to know that double open works well on a 32 fold grid. So that's what I'm going to do today. Feel free to try out an even more open triangle. One word of caution though is the more open your triangle is, the tinier the angle will be between your valley fold that's on the grid line and the new mountain fold on the edge of the twist. So just watch out for that. And I'm going to go ahead and put in my double open triangle right here. So there are always 3 positions of 3-fold rotational symmetry when we are using these equilateral triangle symmetries, which we are today. And in this case, Those three positions are the closed triangle twist, the double open triangle, and its mirror image. So when we're doing this, we want to be aware of what things are going to look the same, what things are going to look different. So this intersection, one grid spacing away from the corner of the double open square, is also going to happen on the other two corners as well. I'm going to focus on the corner that currently has a pleat overlap first, and open that pleat overlap to put in the three-way intersection of mountains on top of it. And it doesn't matter particularly which way I lay down this pleat going to the corner of the paper right now. We'll figure out which way that rotates around later on. And then notice that this pleat that I ran out, this three-way intersection that's happening in here, I did not run all the way. In fact, I ran it just specifically enough to get the outline, the 2 by 2 by 2 outline of my target multi-grid triangle in there. Another way that I can recognize the boundaries of this twist is by saying, okay, I need a tube around the center, so I'm going to have valley folds coming out, protecting this area. And so I can go ahead and squash another double open triangle. And by the way, if you're watching this and writing comments, I think YouTube is glitching a bit. I'm not able to see any comments or real-time analytics. So we've got these two triangles and our central point that occupy the three distinct positions of threefold rotational symmetry. And I'm going to go around and get the rest of these pleats in this state before I use further twists and go onwards from there. So coming around to the next pleat out from the central region, I know that I need to make this tube, and then the third pleat direction needs to outline the 2 by 2 by 2 triangle, and it's going to cause an overlap over here, and we'll squash it. This is exactly like that first double open triangle that I showed when we started this ring around the center. Then I'll repeat again, opening this pleat overlap. The three-way intersection is going to be one spacing away from the corner of the twist. So one spacing away, we'll set up this three-way intersection and let that one lay down flat. Then set up the next double open triangle off of the new intersection of pleats, making sure that we're maintaining our spacing for the tube. Ah, Chris, I see your comment. So I can see comments, just not the real-time stats. Okay. So then coming around to the next set, I'm going to do it exactly like the previous pairs, where I'll set up my tube, set up my third pleat direction. And good morning, Nancy. Welcome, Lisa. And I'm setting up this triangle. I've got my pleat overlap and squashing to form my twist. And I just remembered that there was a question that I posed in the intro that I did not answer yet. There is no limit to the various twists that you can use, the various sizes of a given shape. So opening this overlap, the three-way intersection of mountains is one spacing from the corner of the existing twist. So there's an infinite number of different triangle twists, both on the front and on the back, which really throws in sharp relief the combinatorics of any of these tessellations, because the vast majority of tessellations have variables, like I was saying for this triangle, where you can have many different options in particular positions, in particular alternating triangles. I have a video on alternating triangle twists in the same tiling. You really have free choice for triangle A and triangle B. So let's take a look at what these windows look like on the back, or what's going to be the front side of the pattern. That's pretty cool, huh? We've got these big open windows, and then we have these Y shapes sitting on top. And you can start to see this is going to copy other Y shapes, and we're going to have other windows, and it's just going to be a fantastic, beautiful tessellation with a lot of options for the size of these windows. So flipping back to the side that we're working on, what I want to do next is see where I can find exact copies of things that I can use to reference what I'm folding next. So what I'm looking at down here is a three-way intersection of mountains that's pointing down and has these two triangles with the tips touching above. Well, that looks spookily familiar from this up here. That's going to let me look in at this three-way intersection and say, oh hey, this bit was folded over that way. Good, folded over that way. And I have a closed triangle twist inside. Okay, so on this pleat, I need to have the corner of the closed twist right there, so the center of the closed twist needs to be one spacing out from that. I already have this pleat folded over in the correct direction, so I'm going to bring up my three-way intersection of mountains to form the closed twist and rotate those around, respecting the direction that this pleat is already folded in. Then I'll squash my closed twist, letting this flap float on top. And I should say that while we have free choice for what size window we have, that's just one choice for the whole pattern. We don't get to choose different options at different places. So continuing on around, what we want to do is we took care of this one pleat that was in this direction. We want to move to a different set of parallel pleats and work our way across. So this pleat is the first in the next set of parallel pleats. I'm going to come one spacing out from the closed triangle twist, from the corner of the closed twist, and we need to cover that twist with a three-way intersection that will lay down on top. Then we can see, oh, the tube from on top of this three-way intersection is coming through here. And so I'm going to be putting in my double open triangle up here, and it might be tempting to just run this pleat intersection through, but it's actually going to be easier to open the nearest pleat overlap and turn that into a three-way intersection instead. So once more, I've got this setup, and I know where my valley needs to be because I need to make a tube going into that closed triangle, into the three-way intersection covering it. So I've got a valley, got my mountain. This shows me my 2 grid spacing big triangle. And I can set up my 3rd pleat. Well, that 3rd pleat is running into where I know I already need to put a 3-way intersection of mountains, because it's 1 spacing away from corners of these double open triangles. So I may as well put that in already and just have 1 overlap outside of it. Then I can squash my triangle and come over to this next pleat overlap where, and it's just like if we're using triangle twists for everything instead of some intersections, some twists, we still have 6 of them going around a loop. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We need to finish up 5 and 6. And in this case, they're going to be 1 coming off of the double open corner is going to be a intersection, and then the one down below is going to be a closed twist. So I'm opening this pleat overlap, and I know I need the intersection on top, the twist down below, and here it might be helpful to get both of those intersections really far down so you can start squashing your twist, but often I find it helpful to lift the intersection above the twist to finish squashing, just so I'm not dealing with so many layers under the paper. So that dealt with that next set of parallel pleats, and we're on to the following set. So over here, I've got, and really what we want to do is we want to pick a direction to go around, and when we are moving to the next set of parallel pleats, we want to make sure that whatever we're doing on the first pleat is not causing a pleat overlap back in the direction we came from. So I wouldn't want to do anything off of this pleat because it would cause an intersection here. But this pleat is free to work with. So I can set up my tube coming through here, set up my 3rd direction on that double open triangle, outlining those 2 grid spacings per side of the triangle. I could also reference this by saying, oh, the corners of these triangles touch the neighboring corners, so my valley has to come to this point right here. And we can squash. Then 1 spacing from the corner of the double open triangle, I'm going to put in a 3-way intersection of mountains, and that brings me to a closed triangle twist sitting down below. And I'm kind of taking it on faith a bit that when I lay these down on top, it'll squash nicely. And at least with Skytone, it is squashing quite nicely. So then coming on around, I've got my next set of parallel pleats, and you might have noticed that from my first set of parallel pleats to my second, those were not exactly the same, because we have a position of 3-fold rotational symmetry in the center, not a position of 6-fold rotational symmetry. So we'll have alternating A, B, A, B, A, B sets of parallel pleats. So then for this one, it actually is a good idea, again, to put the 3-way intersection on top of the triangle, the closed triangle that I just folded. And again, I know that that's a good idea here, and it wasn't a good idea here, because here it's creating a tube with the other 3-way intersection, and over here it would have caused an intersection with the double open triangle. So then I've got a new pleat overlap, and I'm going to resolve that by putting in a double open triangle and a 3-way intersection of mountains, a triangle intersection, and just like we saw earlier on. So here we're repeating a set of parallel pleats that we have seen before. And then with this one, like I said, with the loop of 6, we need 2 to finish. And it's going to be a closed triangle and a 3-way intersection of mountains. So here, I'm doing something slightly different to squash this triangle. I pulled back the pleats that are going to fold on top of it to get my squash. This is also a good method to get your pleats in place and make sure that your squash is clean. Then continuing around, I'll move on to the next set of parallel pleats, again, not covering the rest of this closed triangle because it would cause an intersection with this pleat behind. So moving onwards, I'm going to get my double open triangle, just like the one that we did a moment ago. And opening up the pleat overlap, I'll get a 3-way intersection closest to the double open twist and a closed triangle twist further in. And squash. Then continuing around, another way to recognize when you've done a closed triangle and you're trying to decide whether to cover it or move on to the next set of parallel pleats is if the pleat coming from the triangle is the first one in your set of parallel pleats, then go ahead and cover the triangle. But if it's the second one, so if there's one before it, then don't. So coming to this closed triangle we just made, I'll set up the 3-way intersection of mountains on top, creating that tube out to the edge. And then I have a pleat overlap that I will resolve with a double open and a 3-way intersection. Coming around, I have another pleat overlap that I will resolve with a closed triangle and a three-way intersection. And since this is the last bit of this ring around the center, I have another pleat overlap that I will resolve with a double open and a three-way intersection. All right, so at this stage, let's take a look at the other side. We are seeing the repeats start to show up. And we'll be able to use the same exact techniques to continue outwards as far as we want on whatever size of grid that you have. Finishing off this piece though, let's just kind of arbitrarily pick. I think I finished here. So I'm going to pick this set of parallel pleats, and this next round around will finish us off. So I'll set up my double open triangle, and here I am pretty close to the edge, and get that in place. And yeah, it is kind of complex, but once you break it down, it's really coming down to, okay, we've got that closed twist covered by the three-way intersections. And then we have a free choice of what twist to use to space these interactions apart from each other. And so as long as we keep using triangles and keep using the same triangles everywhere, we are good to go. I guess what I'm trying to say with that is it might be origami complex, but it's actually tessellation intermediate. So I've got my own scale that I judge these pieces by, and on that scale, this one is far from complex. If you want to see complex, so I don't think I have any truly complex things in my YouTube channel, but you can check out some of my Instagram posts to see what I think is really complex. So here I'm using the one spacing from the corner of the double open twist to set up my three-way intersection. And if I had more grid, if I had more than 32 divisions, I would have done my three-way intersection over here first, and then have the closed triangle and three-way intersection like we had seen in the previous ring around. And here I've got that double open going to three-way intersection, interaction going on. And then we get another double open to three-way intersection. Continuing around, we'll start seeing repeats of what we've already done. So this is the same as the first triangle that I did in this ring around the center. And And opening this up, I get the three-way intersection going into another double open twist. Continuing around, we have our three-way intersection, and I'm just tucking this little bit under the edge, not worrying about the partial closed triangle. It's not going to change anything on the other side to just tuck that in. And we come into double open and three-way intersection. And double open and three-way intersection. And then coming around, we get a double open that causes a pleat overlap. Same again as that first double open on this ring around. I'm being extra careful because I'm close to the edge. Then opening up, I get my three-way intersection, which is leading back into another double open. And coming around to the last set of parallel pleats, coming off of the corner of a double open, I'll put in a three-way intersection and hide where that closed triangle would be. And then I'll have a double open feeding back into another three-way intersection. Again, being a little more careful on the squash because I am close to the edge. And last but not least, a double open feeding into a a three-way intersection, and getting all of this down and into place. And there we have it. So let's take a look at the final result. Ta-da! I just love this pattern, and being able to use it. It's one of those fascinating things where there are 6 bars coming out from the center, but it's a threefold rotationally symmetric way. So these 3 are the same and these 3 are the same. So this piece works really well on a hexagonal piece of paper, even though it has the threefold rotational symmetry in the center. You can also see bigger hexagons made by the borders of these open windows in all 3 directions. So this one borders this hexagon, this one borders this hexagon, this one borders this hexagon. So yeah, I highly encourage y'all to try this pattern, try variations, try different sizes of these windows, see which ones you like best. And then hold it up to backlighting. Let's see, I'm going to try and grab my light over here, see if I can show you the backlighting, because that is really spectacular as well. Oh, okay. So interesting. Something changed with my setup, but let's hope that this is working. So we've got this, and let me double check, see if I can enable that. There we go. I can see what you see. So we've got backlighting on this that is just stunning as well. Exactly, Chris. Weaving without weaving. And we get these fabulous patterns that I encourage you to try for yourself. So the big takeaway here is that we are not limited to closed and open. We are not limited to this idea just on triangles either. There's infinitely many options for any twist shape you look at. For squares, for hexagons, for rhombuses, and I'm going to do a video on each of those over the next few weeks. So keep following along. Make sure to practice your tessellations at home, and please tag me and show me what you've made. I would love to see everything that you fold, and I like to share what my students are folding as well. So happy folding, everyone, and I will see you next week for general, aka number line, of square twists. See you then.